vision or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Ron Bickelman, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the June 13th and 14th issues of the Wall Street Journal Weekend Edition on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. SpaceX soars in record debut. Largest initial public offering in history mints Musk as the world's first trillionaire in blockbuster day on Wall Street. Shares in SpaceX soared 19% Friday as Elon Musk's rocket maker pulled off the largest initial public offering ever and turned Musk into the world's first trillionaire. The company, valued at $1.77 trillion when it sold $75 billion worth of shares a day earlier, ended its first day of trading with a market value of $2.1 trillion, putting it ahead of Broadcom and Tesla to make it the sixth most valued public company in the U.S. The offering handed long-standing SpaceX investors and employees billions of dollars in collective gains. It was powered by an army of individual investors who bought into Musk's moonshot vision of putting data centers in space to support the rise of artificial intelligence. Ahead of the debut, some of Wall Street wondered whether the financial systems machinery would support the sheer size of the offering and whether investors would show up en masse for an unprofitable venture that sees much of its future revenue coming not from its space or internet business, but from the nascent AI unit. Corporate governance advocates criticize Musk for controlling more than 80% of the company's voting rights, which makes it all but impossible to fire him or make other big changes without his support, and called for halting or boycotting of the offering. In the end, the IPO went about as smoothly as it could. Shares trading under the ticker SPCX opened on the NASDAQ market on a little before noon, 11% above the IPO price of $135. They hovered around about 20% to 30% above it for much of the day, which is the first day pop bankers pricing IPOs typically target, and closed at 160.95. Nearly 24 banks involved in the offering will now enjoy slices of roughly $500 million offering fee that many spent years pursuing. The offering is good and a good omen for SpaceX AI-focused rivals, Anthropic and OpenAI, both of which recently filed paperwork that sets them up to stage similarly supersized offerings later this year. The IPO drew heavy demand from big institutional investors such as BlackRock, but also individuals who in many cases did not get anywhere near the amount of shares they requested through brokerages. Pierluigi Di Amor, 29 years old, said he got one of the 10 shares he requested, and even though he described the valuation as a little over the top, he plans to buy more. I don't think it's going to matter in 10 or 20 years, he said. You've got to think long term. Meanwhile, some analysts struggle to comprehend SpaceX ballooning valuation. Revenue growth it would need to achieve to back up the valuation is borderline comical, CFRA research analyst Keith Snyder said Friday. SpaceX first track inclusion in some indexes such as NASDAQ 100 will mean investment funds tracking those benchmarks will scoop up its shares in the coming days. For Musk, the offering was the finish line of a sprint that began last year. After founding SpaceX in 2002 with proceeds from the sale of internet company PayPal, Musk showed little interest in taking SpaceX public as it grew to become one of the world's most valuable private companies. That all changed in the middle of last year as the AI race heated up, and Musk realized SpaceX would need large amounts of capital for its ambitious plans. He also saw the IPO as a way for the fledgling AI company xAI to catch up with rivals. SpaceX acquired xAI earlier this year after xAI had acquired his social media platform X last year. Some Musk observers expect the merger between SpaceX and Tesla to be next. And SpaceX executive, including President Gwynne Shotwell and Chief Financial Officer Brett Johnson, rang the opening bell Friday in New York's NASDAQ stock market. Musk joined video from Starbase, Texas, the newly incorporated company town where SpaceX is based, surrounded by thousands of SpaceX employees. After the market closed, the iconic Times Square ball that drops each New Year's Eve instead rose to mark the occasion and was lighted in orangish-red colors to represent Mars. The two executives donned astronaut suits. J.P. Morgan Chase hosted a party Friday evening as its Midtown Manhattan headquarters, which was to be lighted up in the SpaceX light display after dusk. SpaceX struggled in the early days. Its first 3 rocket launch attempts failed, and the company nearly went bankrupt. The big break came in 2008 when NASA awarded its first major deal to transport cargo to the International Space Station. In the years that followed, SpaceX demonstrated the power of the rocket reusability with Falcon 9 vehicles and used them to deploy Starlink, the biggest internet satellite fleet in history. 2020, SpaceX launched 2 NASA astronauts from Florida to the space station, marking the first human flight from the U.S. in nearly a decade at the time. The U.S. government is SpaceX's largest single client, with revenue from the government totaling $4 billion in 2025, expected to simply climb over the next few years. The notorious private company detailed its finances for the first time when it unveiled its IPO paperwork last month. SpaceX lost $4.9 billion last year on the revenue of $18.7 billion, and the losses widened in the first quarter. The space business had $4.1 billion in revenue last year and about $657 billion in losses. Its Starlink satellite internet business pulled in $11.4 billion in revenue and turned a profit. xAI had $3.2 billion in revenue and $6.4 billion in losses. SpaceX touted in the filing that it sees a total addressable market, a business term for potential revenue opportunities of $28.5 trillion, the largest such figure of its kind. Vast majority of that $26.5 trillion is in AI. The AI business is in need of major investments to develop the large orbital data center network that aims to provide computing resources SpaceX could use itself and sell to other AI companies. Continuing along now, U.S.-Iran are said to be close to pact. The U.S.-Iran chief mediator from Pakistan all agreed Friday that a peace deal to end the war was nearly complete, though initial agreement would only kickstart the hardest part of nuclear negotiations over the coming months. A senior Trump administration official said he was around 80% confident that a deal could be reached in the next few days. It would include an Iranian commitment not to develop or procure a nuclear weapon, and Tehran's promise that it would destroy its stockpile of highly enriched uranium, the official said. The deal would be structured in a way that Iran receives sanctions relief and economic tariffs for specific steps it takes to wind back the nuclear program, according to the official. If Iran decommissions its nuclear sites, ends its enrichment program, and stops funding proxy militia groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, it could see broad sanctions relief. The signing of an initial deal would open a 60-day period during which Iran would open the Strait of Hormuz and the U.S. would wind back the blockade of Iran ports. During that period, negotiations would be held on a final nuclear deal and sanctions relief Tehran would receive for that. U.S. officials said Iran will receive no money at the start of the deal, despite Tehran's insistence it should receive $24 billion in assets frozen under U.S. sanctions during that period, with some economic relief up front. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi of Iran earlier said a memorandum of understanding has never been closer, while Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said, "We can confirm that a final agreed upon text in the place of a deal has been reached." Iranian officials warned that a final decision has been made. "We are in the final stages of reviewing the text of the initial agreement internally," Iranian Foreign Minister spokesman Esmail Baghani said. The U.S. and Israel attacked Iran on February 28th, and there was fighting for 39 days, with the ceasefire was signed in early April. Since then, it has largely teetered, with both sides shooting at each other and Iran attacking regional countries, including Israel and the Gulf states. Since launching a war on Iran 2 months ago, President Trump said numerous times that the two countries were close to a deal, only for talks to fall through. Some U.S. and Middle Eastern officials have become skeptical of repeated claims of breakthroughs and assess that Tehran hasn't given any core nuclear ambitions despite immense U.S. economic and military pressure, but Trump administration felt they were in a stronger negotiating position this time because Iran's control of Strait of Hormuz has weakened and more oil has been able to move through the strait in recent weeks, a senior Trump administrative official said. Past 24 hours were an all-hands-on-deck situation, said the official, who described the president as being in close touch with his senior team. For the White House, an agreement would end a period where Trump has repeatedly threatened to resume attacks on Iran, but generally pulled back to allow more time for the talks. U.S. officials have said Trump was frustrated by the slow negotiations, but didn't want to resume the fighting. The White House had initially sought a pact that would permanently end Iran's nuclear activities, rein in the ballistic missile program, and end its support for pro-Iranian militia. The U.S. official said Tehran will win broader economic benefits if it steps toward all of those goals. So if they turn over the nuclear material as promised, they'll get something. Iran's security and military officials, centered on the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, had yet to sign off on preliminary deal to wind down the war. Mediators said Friday a potentially significant stumbling block amid rising hopes of a breakthrough to end the conflict. They said the draft is still being reviewed by Iran's hardline security officials, a group more concerned with reestablishing deterrence and denying the U.S. and Israel a victory than ending the war. Speaking to Iranian state media Friday, Aragashi underscored the challenges still facing negotiating teams. The nuclear issue has been postponed to the final agreement, he said. Trump on Friday expressed frustration, accusing Iran of dishonesty. With them, there is so much the thing is dealing in good faith. Trump wrote on social media, they better get their act together and fast. Trump announcement that we just made a great settlement of the war and that the deal has been approved by Iran's top leadership, including Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khomeini. World markets and politics in the region Thursday, just hours after the president had threatened a new round of attacks in Iran and suggested the U.S. might involve Karg Island, the hub of Iran's oil exports. Regional leaders eager to stop another round of escalation in the Persian Gulf phoned Trump on Thursday and pressed him to call off the attacks, saying a deal was close at hand as long as he stopped the strikes and held off on social media. People familiar with the matter said they were shocked when Trump announced the deal had been done. They said countries that have been mediating the talks didn't confirm Trump's optimism in their formal comments. Qatar, a mediator, acknowledged progress in the talks but said they were continuing. Egypt thanked the president for calling off the strikes he had threatened hours earlier and said it hoped the combatants would seize the opening to strike a deal to end the war. Pakistan welcomed the progress that had been achieved. The lobbying effort held off the new U.S. strikes was reported earlier by Politico. The White House didn't reply to a request for comment. A U.S. official said the deal would cover the whole region, including a ceasefire in Lebanon, something Israel had resisted. Aragashi insisted Friday that a deal would include Lebanon and Israel would be required to leave the occupied areas. Their weddings were all planned. Then came Nixon 5. Saturday nuptials are competing with another blissful event, the NBA Finals, Game 5. Days before his wedding, Knicks superfan Kevin Kelly sent his group chat guidelines for their attendance. Watching the NBA Finals during the reception will not be sanctioned. Everybody turn in a good performance, get out on the dance floor, and reward will be at the after party downstairs with TV on for the second half starting at 10:30, Kelly said. Knicks games really pick up anyway, he assured them. After a stunning comeback against San Antonio Spurs Wednesday, the Knicks could clinch their first NBA championship since 1973 with the win on Saturday. For some fans, that basketball fever dream is creating a wedding nightmare. Couples are weighing in just how to incorporate Game 5 into their own special days or looking for ways to dissuade guests from pulling the game up on their phones during key moments, with any devices should be focused on them. Kelly's fiancée, Emily Crimmins, is now thinking of Game 5 as an element of their wedding day akin to the weather. It's out of my control. High-stakes conflicts are now nothing new to wedding planners. Amanda Friedman has projected college football games at cocktail hours, coordinated with DJs to make score announcements, creating cards asking guests to refrain from watching a match during speeches. But Friedman, a Knicks fan herself, understands the challenge. It's a little difficult to say what's more important, she joked. For Manny Gutierrez and Lisa Lorelei Petrie, it's even more loaded. He's a Spurs fan, she's a Knicks fan, and they're tying the knot Saturday in San Antonio. The couple has been hoping their friends and family can keep the game off during the first dance, but even they anticipate they'll be checking the score throughout the evening. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal Weekend Edition on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Time is 15 minutes after the hour. I want to see their team lose, Petrie said. The office manager of their venue, a friend and avid Spurs fan, threatened to kick Petrie and her family out if the Knicks win. If the Spurs take it, Gutierrez plans on forcing his bride and her entire Knicks-supporting family to celebrate with him on San Antonio's Riverwalk. Alexis Davis will also be bringing some Spurs energy to her wedding Saturday in Arkansas. The 22-year-old who grew up just outside San Antonio is asking her DJ to announce the score throughout the reception. But I'm going to tell him if we're losing or lose, maybe just don't say anything, Davis said. Her idea to have a projector playing the game was nixed. My mom was like, absolutely not. Tom Murphy and Stephanie Terranova spent months planning their Jersey City, New Jersey wedding with one glaring gap. We didn't factor this generational run for the Knicks, said Murphy, the 38-year-old avid fan of New York Giants, New Jersey Devils, and Miami Hurricanes. In a shared calendar on the refrigerator, they pencil in important games and avoid scheduling dates or dinners with friends accordingly. Murphy is loyal to LeBron James than Knicks. Terranova doesn't care for sports. That didn't stop friends from texting the couple to see if they'd be airing Game 5. While their rooftop venue does not have televisions downstairs, Terranova has been telling attendees there aren't any. Unfortunately, they do have to walk past all the TVs to get upstairs to the rooftop, so I'll be caught in my lie immediately, Terranova said. I will give quite the look at anyone who approaches me at my wedding dress and asks me if we can go watch the game. Murphy added, it's going to be a great barometer of our relationships. Do you love us or do you love the Knicks? Luis Hernandez and Matt Giardello, who got married in New York's Hudson Valley last Friday during Game 2, have some lessons for Saturday grooms and brides. The couple didn't want the Knicks superfans out on the dance floor with their phones out. Once it became clear it was happening, couldn't avoid it, you had to lean on and embrace it, Hernandez said. They gave a speech at the start of the reception reflecting the importance of a gay wedding in a difficult time for LGBTQ rights. Happy Pride, they told guests, then added Nixon for let's go. Megan Siciliano has indulged her now husband Michael Siciliano's Knicks fandom with frequent Knicks merchandise purchases and an extra TV downstairs. For their wedding last month, she surprised him by setting the playlist for his walk down the aisle, Go New York Go, the team's theme song. But she drew the line at the request for a projector showing the game against Cleveland Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference Finals. Megan had another rule, no watching the game during the wedding. It didn't work. Even Megan's maid of honor betrayed her. The Knicks were up by 10 points during the third quarter when the maid of honor showed him Michael a live stream on her phone. Megan pulled her arm down. You have 10 seconds, she told Michael, and that's it. This Saturday, Megan will get to leave refereeing to the professionals at Frost Bank Center, but she has advice for couples. Hold your ground. Don't let them watch the game. Continuing along now, World Cup immigration goals conflict. U.S. blocks Somali referee entry in clash of Trump's showcase policies. President Trump promoted the 2026 World Cup as a historic opportunity to showcase the beauty and greatness of America while boosting tourism revenues. Instead, the kickoff of the first game on U.S. soil on Friday coincided with airport detentions, visa denials, and global criticisms that his hardline immigration policies are undermining America's role as host of the world's biggest sporting event. More than 24 World Cup players, staff, and officials have encountered visa and entry problems into the U.S. This includes the high-profile detention of a FIFA-selected Somali referee whose case drew worldwide attention when he was questioned for more than 10 hours at the Miami airport before being placed in a holding cell and removed from the U.S. Officials later said they found suspicious associations with members of a terror group. The tournament has already brought crowds of international fans to the U.S. host cities from Boston and Miami to Kansas City, but others have reported spending thousands on tickets, flights, and hotels only to be denied visas. Trump administration had worked to insulate the event, which marketed with the tagline, America welcomes the world, from its travel crackdown from creating priority visa appointment system for ticket holders and carve out for athletes. But months of global attention to Trump's second-term crackdown, including mass immigration arrests, expanded vetting, and high-profile detentions of travelers, has had an adverse effect. Several European countries updated their U.S. travel advisories after their citizens were detained at the border. International arrivals fell 5.5% in 2025, according to the Commerce Department data, making the U.S. the only major detention destination to lose visitors. Instead of World Cup, French and German magazine covers show Trump and masked ICE officials with the words "Welcome to America" and "Spoil Sport." In Argentina, a company offered free television sets for the first 100 people who would show paperwork to prove that they had been denied U.S. visas. The U.S. was expected to draw 1.2 million international World Cup visitors for this month-long tournament, which would be projected to generate up to $17.2 billion in GDP, according to a joint FIFA and other World Trade Organization study released last year. But a survey by the American Hotel and Lodging Association found that 80% of hotel operators in U.S. host cities said bookings were tracking below initial forecasts, with 70% saying visa barriers and broader geographical concerns are significantly suppressing international demand for World Cup travel. Trump officials have defended the disruptions as a price of keeping the country safe. We're working at it very closely to make sure the right people come to our country, Trump said Wednesday after being asked about problems for the World Cup attendings in every country. The U.S. is jointly hosting the World Cup with Canada and Mexico, with 78 of the 104 FIFA matches in the American cities. Trump said he hoped to showcase the biggest, safest, and most extraordinary soccer tournament in history. Ghanaian player Thomas Partey also had his visa rejected by Canada and won't be able to play in the country's opening game. FIFA officials said Friday he faces 7 counts of rape and 1 count of sexual assault in the UK. He had pleaded not guilty. Iran's World Cup team had to move its base from Arizona to Tijuana in Mexico after the visa issues had tensions because of the U.S.-Iran war, complicated plans to train there. The Department of Homeland Security said Iranian players would be allowed to enter the U.S. the day before each of their matches, but several members of the country's team and federation staff were denied visas or left without them. An Iraqi player was questioned for nearly 7 hours in Chicago and had his phone inspected before being allowed to enter the country. The team's photographer was denied entry. Players and staff for Haiti, Switzerland, Morocco also ran into visa problems and delayed them for final days. Trump officials said the U.S. was working to welcome millions of travelers while upholding the U.S. law and high standards for their national security and public safety. But Omar Abubakar Artan, the Somali who was set to make history as the first referee from his country to officiate a World Cup, became the face of these tensions. Despite arriving in Miami with an approved U.S. visa and FIFA credentials, Artan was questioned by U.S. authorities for 10 hours about Somali politics, and al-Shabaab, the al-Qaeda-linked terrorist group. His phone, laptop, and other electronics were taken from him, according to Somali Football Federation officials. U.S. officials said they found alleged links to suspected members of terrorist organizations when he was subjected to additional screening at the airport. Somali government and football officials said they were baffled because he had been vetted by U.S. consular officials and obtained a visa before traveling. After being removed from the U.S., Artan was greeted by more than 100 cheering supporters in Mogadishu. Now let's take a look at some more world news. A year inside a Ukraine city, as Russia's army closed in, residents grappled with agonizing decision over whether to remain. Russia's army is grinding forward slowly in eastern Ukraine, churning up everything in its path. In a band of towns and cities along an 800-mile front, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians face a daily question: when to drop everything and flee. Druzhkivka Kivka, an industrial city once home to about 68,000 people, is one of them. It's among a handful of cities that are Russia's main target for 2026. Over the course of the year, the Wall Street Journal followed the town and its people wrestling with leaving in their homes as the fabric of their lives is slowly, painfully torn apart. The pressure creeps up, gradually, almost impeccable to day by day, tormenting inhabitants with certainty as they watch a city close down around them. In February 2025, the sound of artillery was still distant, but factories had long since shut down. By July, the city began emptying out as explosive drones started to reach streets. Fishermen were keeping a hold of tiddlers they used to throw back. In December, the streets were deserted as a curfew allowed only 4 hours outside every day, and evacuation teams were overwhelmed with requests to run the gauntlet of Russian drones and military on roads out of the city. February 2025. On one February morning last year, fishermen dropped lines through drilled holes in the ice as artillery echoed nearby phones. Outgoing sent Ola Inatiev, one of the fishermen, as ice emitted a ghastly howl. Inatiev, a former hemmed between two narrow rivers, Droskivka took its modern shape around coal mines and factories that thrived in the Soviet Union but struggled after its collapse in 1991. Inatiev, a former factory worker, felt the nexus of anxiety and poverty grow as bombardments intensified. "How do we live here?" he said. "We don't earn much money. We're stretched thin." Those left in the city were already mostly pensioners, those without means to leave, and residents hoping the Russians could be stopped. July of 2025, the windows of the Droskivka tram were open on a sweltering summer afternoon as women in flowery dresses made their way to their weekend market. Before the war, tram workers organized celebrations for children during holidays. Residents sometimes rented a car for birthday parties, laying out food and hanging decorations with guests boarding at different stops along the route. Once after the war began, a soldier's friends brought him to Droskivka so they can ride the tram for the first time in his life. Tetiana Yeriskolova, who had been driving trams since 1994, recalled him grinning broadly the entire way. "War is war," she said, "but you still want to feel the joy in life." By July, the Russians continued to drive forward, and bombardments in Droskivka increased. Explosive drones were within range, but incidents in the city were sparse. Military vehicles were decked with anti-drone jammers and protective cages. Fishermen still cast their rods along the riverbanks, but there were fewer fish and anglers than before the war, said one of them, lifelong fisherman. "Now we just keep the fish we used to throw back," he said. December of 2025. By winter, Kivka was a ghost town. Its population shrank to 17,000. The government deemed it an active combat zone, urging all civilians to leave while they still could. Apartment blocks stood empty. The streets were deserted, save between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. The only break in curfew. Those who remained rushed to markets and few working shops. Helena Sheskova had hoped for some kind of brokered peace deal. "I understand that the front is getting closer," she said. But where could she go with the 20 dogs in her care and her monthly pension of 3,400 hryvnias, about $80? A soldier offered to help evacuate Sheskova and her dogs. She packed up but was still indecisive. "Why do I give you 3 minutes to think whether you're going to leave or not?" he said. "How?" she said. "There are 20 of them. Let's try," he said. She said, the decision to leave. They agonized for months and had to come to her in a split second. The exodus had been massive. There are now only 6,000 people left in the town. Municipal authorities say Mariana Oshpenko, Droskivka's oldest resident at 101, fled to the city of Kharkiv with her daughter. "We really didn't think we would leave," she said. February 2025, July 2025. Now let's take a look at the exchange. McDonald's put the squeeze on Coke. Changing consumer tastes, increasing competitions challenge one of the most successful and oldest corporate partnerships. Waddy Pratt, a local Coca-Cola executive, pulled up to a nascent hamburger chain in Des Moines, Illinois, where a man named Ray Kroc was spraying down the parking lot with a hose. The ambitious soda entrepreneur thought the McDonald's restaurant that Kroc envisioned stretching coast to coast needed a signature drink and believed Coke could be it. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal Weekend Edition on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. It's 30 minutes after the hour. Their handshake deal in 1955 sealed a union between two brands that together went on to become icons of American capitalism and America itself. Since then, our brands have been attached at the hip. At the zip, Coke said later that year in a LinkedIn post celebrating their 70th anniversary. But like so many relationships, they're having problems. It's not that the two aren't committed to one another, executives say. It's just that McDonald's right now is no longer content to planning everything around Coke alone. McDonald's is on the hunt for new business. Growth in U.S. burger sales has slowed. Starbucks and Dunkin' are showing that drinks generate billions of dollars on their own. McDonald's this spring introduced its own custom sodas and refreshers and is gearing up to launch a line of energy drinks anchored by Red Bull, a first for the Golden Arches. The burger chain's executives and operators say they have for years clamored for more options than Coke. Some past attempts to innovate, from selling bottled drinks to what Coke called freestyle soda dispensers that led consumers to create their own mixes, have sputtered. Meanwhile, the popularity of traditional soda is hurting as younger consumers want exotic flavors and concoctions with TikTok-ready colors. Coke gets the message and we want more from them, said Jim Lewis, a former McDonald's franchisee who worked closely with Coke during his 32 years running restaurants. Lewis, once the president of the chain's New York Metro Franchise Co-op, traveled to Atlanta to meet with Coke executives in the 2000s, tested that company's freestyle machine in Queens restaurants in the early 2010s, and was a chain committee exploring bottled beverages at McDonald's, including Coke's vitamin water. He found the freestyle machine took more work than it was worth and didn't move sales, and the tests of Coke's vitamin water ended as well. Working on the McDonald's account is a prestigious post at Coke's Atlanta headquarters. The group president reports directly to Coke's CEO and is a 34-year Coke veteran who rose through the ranks across the globe. A former lead was the son of past Coke CEO Robert Guizetta. Henrique Braun, who took over the Coke as the chief executive in March, said the company's partnership with McDonald's remains fantastic. As we do with all our consumers, we respect their decisions, Braun said in an interview on McDonald's edition of Red Bull. But we always try to push to continue to be the number one provider of every choice of beverages for all consumers, and it's no different from McDonald's. The biggest burger chain in the world, with annual revenue of about $27 billion, said it was committed to its long-standing partnership with Coke, while looking to broaden its network of suppliers to its 45,700 restaurants, including 13,730 in the U.S. We're guided by evolving consumer preferences and emerging trends, a spokeswoman said. At the National Restaurant Association's annual trade show in Chicago last month, Coke showed off a kaleidoscope of drinks, and it's currently testing, including a rainbow-hued frozen energy drink and pink drinks geared towards younger consumers. Traditionally, Coke wouldn't showcase beverages still under development, said Josh Gurley, Coke's head of transformation and strategic growth. But the drink giant with $47.9 billion in annual revenue knows restaurants want more, so it was passing out tastes of strawberry hot honey lemonade and blueberry London fog drinks. Traditionally, Coke would have buttoned up term sheets showing off new drinks. This is a little uncomfortable for us, said Gurley, as people nearby tried plastic shot glasses of Fanta-infused orange shakes and Sprite mixed with pear syrup. In 1955, When Pratt and Kroc crossed paths, they saw that standardizing the product the burger chain carried would help ensure uniform quality and drive down costs by increasing purchasing power. Pratt tasked a handful of executives to work with him on what became known as the McDonald's division, or TMD for short. Coke was focused on selling traditional Coca-Cola and McDonald's fountains, and the chain also sold its beverages, including root beers and orange drink. Coke hired salesmen to serve McDonald's franchises and expanded its offerings to include Sprite in the 80s, bumping rival 7-Up off McDonald's fountains. Coke representative working on the McDonald's account called themselves the keeper of the handshake in reference to the original deal. From the early days, McDonald's wanted a Coke poured from its fountain to taste better and fresher than everywhere else, even if the competitors also sold Coke. So McDonald's took unusual measures, particularly for something whose recipe is one of the most famous secrets. McDonald's franchises instilled filtration equipment to ensure the cleanest, crispest flavor. Soda syrup and carbonated water were kept just above freezing to trap more carbon dioxide and increase the fizz. McDonald's frequently calibrates its machines to ensure the right amount of Coke syrup concentrate in its sodas to help retain the flavor even after the ice melted in the drinks. Coke instructed its technicians to conduct regular quality reviews of McDonald's equipment, scrutinizing everything from temperature to carbonation levels. They delivered Coke syrup in 75-gallon stainless steel barrels on trucks, pumped directly into McDonald's restaurants through hoses to guarantee freshness. The collaboration paid off for both companies. In the 80s, Coke executives advocated the idea of an extra value meal at McDonald's, building a sandwich, soda, and fries at discounted price. The concept now is standard for the food industry. It would generate more sales for both Coke believe. Coke helped fund McDonald's marketing, particularly for value meal campaigns, and Coke drinks became staples of McDonald's ads. McDonald's moved in the late 2022 to a la carte dollar menu, which didn't feature Coke drinks as prominently as value meals. It was a hard time for Coke. Soft drink sales were falling in the U.S., including restaurants. Fast food chains started testing teas, lemonades, smoothies, and special coffees. Around 2006, Coke launched Project Grab and Go to see its selling bottled beverages could boost sales at McDonald's. The soda company installed coolers in the handful of Texas locations, stocking them with Coke's non-soda brands such as Powerade, carbonated coffees, and energy drinks. Some franchises started selling bottled PepsiCo drinks stored in separate coolers, including Mountain Dew and Gatorade, for the first time in McDonald's history. Franchises made less money off bottled drinks than fountain soda. And the bottled beverage test with PepsiCo ended in 2009. But Coke executives took notice, some worried about their company's top-tier status at the Golden Arches. Then McDonald's gave spots in some soda fountains to Dr. Pepper, largely bumping Coke's lesser-loved Mr. Pibb soda by 2010. McDonald's has its own reasons to consider both partners. PepsiCo helped Taco Bell strike gold with Mountain Dew Baja Blast, a soda developed just for the chain that debuted in 2004 and will go on to rack up more than $1 billion in sales a year. Soda itself faced a new threat. Starbucks was expanding its iced and blended cold drinks. Its fruity refresher beverages, introduced in 2012, would grow to become a $2 billion brand. Seattle chain turned cold foam into other custom ingredients into $1 billion annual revenue, capturing more younger consumers. In 2015, Coke acquired a stake in Monster, a fierce competitor of Red Bull, and McDonald's tested Monster in a handful of U.S. restaurants. The drinks didn't sell well. McDonald's instead opted to expand its McCafe premium coffee line. McDonald's hired its current CEO, Chris Kempczinski, in 2015 as head of strategy and innovation, joining the burger brand and its own beverage experience. Kempczinski came to McDonald's from Kraft Heinz and had previously spent 8 years as the executive of PepsiCo. Kempczinski set his sights on selling more drinks. The global beverage market had clearly doubled in the prior 15 years to $1 billion, and he wanted McDonald's to grab a bigger piece of it. In 2023, McDonald's launched a new restaurant concept called Cosmix that served lattes, frappes, sodas, and other novelty drinks. Cosmix was short-lived. Its 5 locations closed roughly 18 months later, but McDonald's soon started incorporating what it learned. Kempczynski in 2025 appointed Charlie Neuberger, the executive who had led Cosmix, to oversee McDonald's beverage development. We need somebody who's single-handedly thinking about McDonald's beverage offering needs to look like in 5 years' time, given what the world's going to be different, Kempczynski said in a 2025 interview. During an April afternoon at McDonald's headquarters in Chicago, the company invited a few dozen social media influencers for sneak at the new beverage lineup rollout this spring and summer. Jennifer Del Vecchio, head of McDonald's U.S. beverage strategy, said at the event that consumers in the early test tended to order new drinks instead of the sweet tea, lemonade, or other fountain drinks. Traditional sodas didn't take a bigger hit than other fountain beverages, she said. During the May restaurant trade show, Coke showed off a new beverage machine for making the so-called dirty sodas and other syrup-infused beverages at restaurants. McDonald's representatives examined the equipment when visiting the Coke booth, said Kaiser Shares, a Coca-Cola innovator director. McDonald's has tested new drinks in Colorado and Wisconsin, including Sprite Lunar Splash, made with Coke's lemon lime soda, along with drinks incorporating Red Bull flavored syrups. Some restaurants also dabbled with beverages featuring a generic drink base. But Red Bull stole the show. I think I have a new addiction. This is actually really good, said one McDonald's customer in TikTok post. After the Red Bull test at McDonald's, McDonald's launched 6 new specialty drinks this spring. Ray Kroc below. OpenAI and Anthropic are facing a price war. Pressure grows to cut costs amid a rise of cheaper AI models. The AI price war has begun. Big companies and startups, chafing at rapidly escalating artificial intelligence costs, are increasingly turning to tools that tap into cheaper AI models, including some from China. That's raising pressure on industry leaders, OpenAI and Anthropic, to lower their prices, a prospect that could hurt their ability to grow into profitable enterprises. The new cost savings tools help businesses save on AI costs by dynamically switching among a mixture of third-party AI models, in-house AI systems built using freely available open source models. The ecosystem allows autonomous AI systems or agents to use cheap models, including those made by Chinese companies like Alibaba or DeepSeek for many functions. The agents tap only the most capable versions of OpenAI, ChatGPT, and Anthropic's Claude for more complex tasks. This can reduce costs for some AI-assisted works by as much as 95%, according to executives who use the tool. Once we find something that's working well and engineers love, we find ways to make it cost-effective, said Dan Robinson, founder of Detail, a startup that intensifies bugs. They're really an embarrassment of riches right now coming out of the open source labs. Robinson shifted 90% of Detail's workload from Claude and Google Gemini to custom models and GLM, a family of models developed in China. The shift to cheaper models appears to have played a role in a recent decline in a widely followed index that tracks AI spending. Citadel Security said in a report this week, even the most powerful technologies must pass through prosaic discipline to cost curves, capacity constraints, and marginal returns, the report said. OpenAI is considering drastic cuts to the prices it charges AI users ahead of similar cuts the company expects at Anthropic. The Wall Street Journal reported. The company sees itself as having an advantage in such a scenario because it spent massive sums in the past year to secure Anna Moneymaker Getty Images computing resources at far lower prices than what's available now. Chief Executive Sam Altman said in a recent company event that the cost has suddenly become a huge issue. Growing price war threatens to widen losses at OpenAI and Anthropic, which are already bleeding billions of dollars a year to pay for computing firepower to build and operate advanced AI systems. Both companies have filed confidential paperwork ahead of potential initial filing offerings. Pressure on AI prices is also a new data point in the longstanding debate over whether lower cost competitors will commodify AI models in coming years. One of the biggest AI companies' fast pace of improvements will keep them ahead. Both OpenAI and Anthropic will offer cheaper models of which they can steer consumers to lower costs. You don't need a model that knows quantum gravity, said Vihal Misra, Vice Dean of Computing at AI in Columbia University's Engineering School. The open source models are very capable, and the ability to charge a big premium for AI is going to diminish. U.S. companies are also trying to tap into the momentum for cheaper AI models. Microsoft unveiled a suite of smaller AI models last week and said it can operate more efficiently than leading-edge models. Chip titan NVIDIA has launched Nemotron, a family of cheaper models that's gaining traction, and also has backed Reflection, a startup building open source AI. Open source Chinese models have been rising in popularity across American businesses. DeepSeek's share of AI rose from 1% in April to 17% in May. The startup Vercels platform, the company said. Oh, and OpenRouter, another startup that processes AI queries. DeepSeek has been the most used AI company since mid-May. Among its biggest spending customers, open source token usage grew 4 times faster than open source between 2025 and spring of 26. The fall of 25 and spring of 26, OpenRouter said the company also has seen more than 500 organizations swap from proprietary to open source models. Optimizing AI spending can make for complex math. Open source models cost far less per token, the basic unit of AI computing. Anthropic's recently released Fable 5 model is more than 50 times more expensive per token than DeepSeek V4 Pro, for example. But the top priority models like companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, or Google remain 4 to 6 months ahead of open source competitors, researchers say. In some cases, that means they can complete a complex task using fewer tokens, equating to a lower total cost. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal Weekend Edition on the Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. Time is 45 minutes after the hour. Companies are increasingly evaluating models on price per task, what it costs to complete a task, start and finish, and night price per token, an Anthropic spokesman said. AI executive assistant startup Lindy began exploring DeepSeek's V4 model 2 months ago. Founder Flo Crivello said he has his 25-person team built extensive internal tooling to see if the Chinese open source model could handle Lindy's tasks in managing inboxes and calendars, drafting emails, and transcribing meetings. They found that DeepSeek handled all those tasks as well as Anthropic's Sonnet, and that it was good at email triaging in particular, and Crivello said it was 10 times cheaper. The company still uses more advanced Anthropic model for internal coding, but the move overall has saved the company millions of dollars, Crivello said. Many companies have begun to design their own AI models using open source alternatives and say they are managing to reduce AI costs. When companies build in-house models and train them with company data, their performance can improve or even exceed the capabilities of frontier AI models, executives said. Others have begun to use tools that mix and match various AI models depending on cost and what tasks are performed. Our AIs now, they are so stingy and parsimonious, said Andrew Moore, former lead of Google Cloud AI, whose startup Lovelace AI has a platform aimed at making AI agents more efficient. They know exactly how to get something out of the cheapest models possible. When they get into trouble, they temporarily jump up to a higher price point with a fancier model. Maiten Ginsberg, CEO of Factory, which offers autonomous coding, has developed a product that uses a mixture of AI models, said his phone has been ringing all day, every day in recent weeks. His top executives in industries ranging from finance to telecommunications have reached out to try to reduce AI spending. The price war is going to be good, and we want to be able to help that, to enable that, said Ginsberg. News Corp, the owner of Wall Street Journal, has content licensing partnership with OpenAI. In sports, Let's take a look at the World Cup. Just one day before the start of the 2018 World Cup in Russia, for which the U.S. failed to qualify, the Federation was given a new goal. That's when FIFA decided that the 2026 World Cup would be held in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. The Americans had 8 years to get their act together. After the embarrassment of 2018, they simply couldn't humiliate themselves on home soil. So the U.S. cleared out its veterans and began building around a nucleus of young players who plied their trade in Europe's toughest leagues. Christian Pulisic, who broke out as a teenager in Germany with Borussia Dortmund, became the face of the group. They hadn't achieved anything yet, but they were widely dubbed as America's golden generation. Now the time has finally arrived to find out whether they can live up to the moniker or if they'll succumb to its curse. On Friday, the U.S. kicked off its first home World Cup in 32 years against Paraguay in SoFi Stadium outside of Los Angeles. When you dream of this as a kid, said midfielder Christian Roldan, who grew up nearby California, you dream of moments like this. One way to understand how the U.S. methodically cultivated this team is by looking back at what it did 4 years ago. When it looked to right the ship after the fiasco leading up to Russia, then coach Greg Berhalter didn't return to seasoned veterans for the build in Qatar in 2022. He did the exact opposite. The average age of U.S. players in qualification was just 24.1 years old, the youngest of any team to reach the tournament. Once the World Cup began, they showed glimpses of potential too. It was particularly true. The Americans held England to a 0-0 draw at Al Bayt Stadium. But their inexperience became apparent when they barely survived a jittery ending to beat Iran 1-0 in advance to the knockout stage and then slumped out with a 3-1 loss at the Netherlands. Overall, it was clearly progress from 2018. But getting bounced in the round of 16 wasn't a rousing success either. Instead, the process would be judged by how those players fared in 2026. One of our strengths was coming into this tournament is how much more experienced we are, said winger Gio Reyna. We're all older, we're matured as people and as players. Reyna is one of the 13 players from the Qatar squad selected by coach Mauricio Pochettino for this year's roster, tying the U.S. record for most carryovers between World Cups. 8 of them started all 4 matches in Qatar, including all 3 of their U.S. goal scorers there. Pulisic, Tim Wee, and Haji Wright. The average age of this roster is nearly 27 years old, and 26-year-old squad, and the 26-man squad has a combined 505 international appearances. Still, not long ago, it looked like the team might never coalesce the way everyone envisioned. The nadir of this cycle arrived at 2024 Copa America, hosted by the U.S., where the team crashed out the following losses to Panama and Uruguay. The result led to the ouster of Berhalter and the hiring of Pochettino. At that stage, they appeared destined to be another so-called golden generation that would never live up to the hype like David Beckham's England in the 2000s. Luis Figo, Portland's Luis Figo's Portugal a decade earlier, or several other versions of the Netherlands. Lately, though, there has been more reasons for optimism. In a tune-up against Senegal, the Americans won 3-2 against a country seen as a World Cup star course as Pulisic snapped a 5-month goalless drought. Then last week, the U.S. hung with Germany before losing 2-1. While members of the squad might be older now, the day before their opening match, before a directive from Pochettino was that they play like they are a child and not feel the pressure of an enormous stage. Nonetheless, the expectations from the boss are extraordinary. Nothing short of hosting the trophy at MetLife Stadium would make them happy. If we don't arrive to the final and we don't win the World Cup, talk about successful. Pochettino said, I don't know. These diehard Knicks fans snoozed and missed a historic finals win. When Kevin Lavin woke up at around 3 a.m. Thursday, he didn't bother checking the final score of the Knicks game the night before. His team was losing by nearly 30 points when he fell asleep during Game 4 of the NBA Finals. He felt certain that he knew what had happened, so he rolled over and went back to bed. I can't take the depression of the Knicks losing, said Levin, a 74-year-old finance executive from New Jersey. Around 3 hours later, he finally looked at his phone and saw a message from his son. The news seemed impossible. The Knicks had staged the most remarkable comeback in finals history, and Levin missed it. I turned on the TV, he said, and started running around the house. When OG Anunoby's miraculous tip-in fell through the net Wednesday to give the Knicks a 3-1 series lead, it seemed as though every single person in the New York metropolitan area exploded with joy. But that wasn't entirely true, because there were nearly 20,000 delirious onlookers inside Madison Square Garden, and millions more watching at home or celebrating. A few faithless and frustrated Knicks fans were busy doing something else. During one of the great New York parties of the century, they were fast asleep. Colin Korzik, 39-year-old from New Jersey, who works for a construction company, gave up early in the third quarter. He started doing some quick math in his head, figuring that San Antonio was going to score somewhere around 125 points, and the Knicks could never catch up. Meanwhile, he had to be up early Thursday, so he figured he might as well take advantage of the opportunity to get a little extra sleep. When Korzik woke up, he scanned his phone to find out how much the Knicks had lost by, only to find that the Spurs scored all of 30 points in the second half. My jaw dropped, he said. Even Knicks diehards could be forgiven for not being able to stick out Game 4. The contest tipped off around 8:45 local time, and after plenty of physical play, hard fouls, and replay views, stretched out for more than 2 hours and 50 minutes. That meant fans with early morning jobs or small children had to weigh their commitment to the team against their commitment to sanity. I'm a big Knicks fan, said HuffPost founder Ariana Huffington in an interview, but I'm a big sleep evangelist. Huffington watched the dismal first half with her sister and daughter, both of whom stayed awake when she called it quits. She decided that a 29-point deficit in the second half was simply too wide a chasm to overcome. Now I can see the replays, Huffington said. I'm surprised I wasn't woken up by the cheers. On Thursday morning, Huffington fired off a post on social media. Went to bed at halftime last night. Did I miss anything? Now Huffington jokes that she has a foolproof plan to ensure the Knicks will clinch the title on Saturday night in San Antonio. I'm planning on going to bed at halftime of Game 5 too, she said. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the June 13th and 14th issues of the Wall Street Journal Weekend Edition. We read from the Wall Street Journal edition every Monday at 7 a.m. Your reader has been Ron Bickelman. Thank you for listening.
You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Volunteer radio readers broadcast daily readings, 24 hours a day, of newspapers, magazines, books, and other printed matter to area people who are blind or have a print disability, who are provided reading radios. The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service has broadcast almost 40 years of radio readings to those without sight. Our broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Radio Reading Studios are at 1199 Harlem Road in Cheektowaga. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call 716-821-5555. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability